Welcome to this podcast. I am Sidney, and this is Chris Mahalso.
I'm Daddy.
Yes, and these are a series of podcasts about Fijian history from the 1500s and the BC era to today and even the 2030s.
Wow.
And so, let's begin. So this episode is going to be of resources of where to get the information about it.
So, my understanding here is I'm just going to kind of tee this up and let you talk about Fiji a bit.
Make sure you're the general audience.
Well, it's safe to say that I know almost nothing about Fiji, so if that's kind of the effect you were going for, I'm the perfect guy for this job. So, you mentioned the 1500s BC.
No, I did say 1500s BC. Mm-hmm. Fiji wasn't even inhabited at that point.
Well, that was my question, is did you pick that date at random, or does that represent the beginning of recorded history in that part of the world?
There was no recorded history for quite a bit. I mean, there was possibly, they have discovered a rank system in the 90s, but they don't really deem it a rank system. It's more BC pictographs.
Okay. So what would you consider the first recorded historical anything in Fiji? Like when...
Well, of Fiji or of the people or what?
The area that we now call Fiji, what is the first historical record of anything there?
Well, the first let me start from the beginning. The first record of there being anything of Fiji is actually by Tonga. Now, Tonga didn't have a rank system, but they were the first to call it Fiji. Because in Fijian, it's called Viti. But in Polynesian languages, the V is pronounced. So actually, vowels are more important than consonants. Like, if you're someone with a heavy English accent, I mean different types of English, I don't mean, like, British accent. You mostly hear a difference in vowels. You won't hear, like, different consonants. If you did have something, different consonants, we would have no understanding of that. But it's the other way around in the South Pacific.
That makes sense. Okay.
And so first I actually want you to look at a map of Fiji just to see where it is and where it is. Well,
you're going to have to just describe that.
Well, I just want to look at a map. Just Google it.
Well, we're audio only here, so...
Yes.
Yeah, don't Google it.
Okay.
Go ahead. Tell us about Fiji.
So, but the Tongans, because V to them is pronounced like an F, and T is pronounced like a J, not really like J, but more like, not really a T, it's more like it's in between, but not Ch, it's J, like that.
Okay.
So Fiji. That's how you got the name. But the first European to ever spot Fiji was in 1642 as Abel Tasman. And...
What was his name?
Abel Tasman.
Okay.
Like as in Tasmania, as in it was named after.
Oh. Where is he from?
He was from the Netherlands. And when he saw it was a terrible storm, so he was only able to chart the Lau Islands and see it. Now, people were already in Tonga before, and the reason he definitely did not want to land was because they called it the Cannibal Islands. The Tongans depicted the Fijians as these, like, the reason you ever heard of them being headhunting savage people, they thought of the people in the center of Viti Levu, the Kaidolo people. Now, everyone outside... Because the Tongans invaded in the 1000s, we'll get to that a different time. When they invaded, they actually, most of them, there was intermarriage, there was a lot of things. So technically, they consider all the people there their descendants. So when actual Fiji, they only thought of this in the mountains in the middle of Viti Levu, the Kaitola. So they always described them as that, so they knew it as the Cannibal Islands. And no one was ever there until the early 1800s. People were there in the late 1700s, but they weren't landing and going there.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine being called the Cannibal Islands kept a lot of people away.
It did.
Yeah, sure.
It scared people away.
Not the best advertising.
Now let's get to our first part, resources. Now, how easy do you think? So a lot of times you'll hear, if you go in the library, you'll figure out your question. How many times have you gone in the library and figured out the question you were looking for?
I avoid libraries personally. So,
why?
Well, I'm just not much of a reader. But, when I had to when I was in college, when I had to go to the library to work on things, I always struggled with it. I had a hard time. And I think you almost, with a college library, especially with a college like the one I went to, it wasn't a huge
What
college.
college did you go to?
I went to Ithaca College.
Where's that?
It's in middle New York area. And I mean, it wasn't a bad school or anything, but you almost have to find out what they've got and then decide what you're going to write about, because you can't have this like super ambitious idea and then go and find out none of the resources are there. You're going to end up back at square one. Now, it would be different if you just wanted to hop a bus and go over to the Cornell Library. They have multiple libraries.
The University of Rochester.
What's that?
The University of Rochester?
Nah, I'm not going. That's 2 hours away. But I'm just saying, like, there were alternatives, but I mean, that's not really what we were supposed to do. So to answer your question, I've never had a great experience researching in a library, probably because I probably just didn't have a great library. Okay,
so for those who do have a good library, if you try to go look for Fijian history, you won't find nothing. Depending on where you are, for example, if you're in like the Brooklyn Public Library, New York Public Library, Rochester Library, London Library, the Suva Archives, wrong library, the Fiji Museum Library. Those are only places you're going to find information really about this.
So, Fijian history...
Now, here's the reason why, Dave.
Oh, go ahead.
So, it's not because there's no information, because it wasn't written down. Oral history, even with the spread of Christianity and Wesleyanism and all of that, there were still oral history they very much know.
Yeah, okay.
Especially in the remote areas, like in the Suva, you won't really, or Lautoka or Nundi, you won't really find that much, but in places like the Lau Islands, the Kailolo provinces, Gandavu, you'll find stuff like that.
You'll find reference materials, you mean?
You'll find oral history.
Oh, you'll find people who can tell you about it.
Yes.
Okay, which can be useful.
Yes. Now, here's the reason. It's not because there's no information. It's just because no one cares to learn about the information.
Well, I don't think there's a whole lot of people seeking out.
There's few
Fijian
people, and
texts.
I can name a few of those people. Now, Derryk Scarr is one of them. Now, you will find his books in a lot of libraries, like this one right here, Fiji, A Short History, or and Denge's Descendants. Those are common books. They hold a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's other books, like Quain. He does a good one, and you can actually buy his books, surprisingly. It's probably the most available one.
Okay.
But as for the really good ones that go really in-depth, for example, the guy who did the introduction for A Short History of Fiji did the most infuriating introduction in the world.
Is that the guy that had all, the vaguely racist stuff to say about?
Oh no, that was
that was another guy.
That was Alfred Mayer. He's a very bad man. Avoid him. Avoid his books. And so he did an infuriating introduction. It was just 1982, not 2018.
Okay.
He said, "This is a short history of Fiji. I'm sure in the next 10 years there will be complete tens of volumes of history of Fiji. But at the moment, we will just give you a small history of Fiji for you to understand, not to give you a lot of information." That was a summary of exactly what he said. He just said that a little more sentences than that, but he did use some of those exact words.
Interesting. So,
of course, even 40 years later, there is no any volume book, really, on Fijian history.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So he was just sort of hinting at work he was gonna do, and then he never did.
No, he thought
Other people. Okay.
After Derryk Scarr wrote the book.
I see.
Derryk Scarr does a good job doing the stuff.
Huh.
He's one of the few men alive that does that.
Interesting. Well, I'm guessing there's not a whole ton of different people out there working on Fijian history.
But there's one guy, his name is Hokart. A.M. Hokart.
Okay.
So, here's the very funny thing I found once. I want to share this. There was an ebook online of one of his books. It's impossible to find his books unless you live in the places I gave. And it was the northern states of Fiji. It was about the Kandrove and the other areas in Vanuatu, in that island, in northern Big Island.
Mm-hmm.
And name actually means, what was it? I think it was either, let's see.
Pronounce it again? What was the word?
Vanuatu. No, sorry, Vanuatu. The V is kind of wah. It's not really like v.
Ah, okay. Okay, yeah, I got
Let me think. It means something. Great land.
Great land. Oh, that's simple. Okay, good.
No, big land. Big land.
Big land. Great.
Because Vanuatu is a land or state or confederacy of Vanuatu. We'll do that in another episode.
Okay.
And it can also mean land. And because
is that why Vanuatu has that name?
What?
Is that why Vanuatu has that name?
Vanuatu is nowhere near Fiji.
No, I wondered if it was the same dialect or something, though. No. Not at all? Okay.
Nothing to do with Fiji.
Gotcha. All right.
It is Melanesian, but the language is very, very different.
It's just a coincidence. Got it. Okay.
And the Levu means big. Or great. I was one of them.
All right.
Therefore, but in Fijian, the adjectives comes after the noun.
Okay.
But it was about that, and it said, if you want this ebook, you have to contact the owner and get permission. Except the owner died 1930 something. I don't remember.
Okay.
He was born 1884. Of course.
So that's out of the question, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unless you live in those places.
Yeah.
Described earlier. And he also has a really good book, Wow Islands. Thankfully, it's actually one in Tampa.
Really?
Yeah. Except I never go to Tampa. I'm always in St. Pete, even though it's farther away. Just have no reason to be in Tampa and look at books.
What library is that in?
The University, USF.
USF, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think what we've sort of established here is that there's not a whole lot of material because there's not a whole lot of people doing this.
Except for one place.
Okay, go.
If you live in Suva or Lautoka or somewhere near there, you'd probably easily drive to the Fiji Museum Library.
Mm-hmm.
So this is probably the only place you'll really find good information on Fijian history.
That makes
It's
sense.
not just dedicated to Fijian history. It has no library catalog. I contacted them and found they answered at just come.
Yeah.
Because it's on the website, please ask us to prepare the materials. I said, I don't know materials you have. Probably 10 years from now. They say.
Yeah, I mean, how many books does this place have?
They have over 10,000 books, over 12,000 oral history cassettes, and about 5,000 other things like photographs and DVDs and that.
See, it almost seems like if you make it all the way to Fiji and you want to learn about Fiji, are you going to spend your time in the library or are you going to
I would
talk to
definitely
people?
do that.
Oh, no, I know you would, but
Well,
I'm
that
saying...
depends if you are. If you're in the
wanna do
high rises
both.
of Suva, you aren't going to really find stuff. You're going to find stuff in the library. But if you're in, like in the villages of Lao,
Yeah.
you'll be seeing far more oral history.
I think it would be a good idea to do both if you really want to go there and learn as much as you can. I have a feeling it's worth doing a little of both.
You could. Yes, it is probably worth doing both.
Yeah.
Maybe
That's
I'll
probably unavoidable.
Maybe one day I'll pay someone to go explore around the area, like a guild.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be awesome for somebody who's really into it. I mean,
Sure.
geez, that's you should do that.
I'd pay it.
You should plan on doing that. Yeah.
Maybe.
Interesting.
Except they can't really do anything to make that money till I'm 14.
Well, I have a feeling you will do it if you want to do it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, if you want to find resources for that, it's really the only place you're truly going to find stuff. Of course, New York, you definitely have everything near you.
Yeah.
But even the Library of Congress has nothing really compared to those two places.
No, that makes a lot of sense, though.
Surprisingly, if you live in Rochester also, not really the biggest town, but you will find most of that information there.
Which library is that?
It was one of the libraries. There's like 6 libraries at the University of Rochester.
Oh, okay, I see.
Like Tovada, the A.C. Reid. I've never seen any of his books, but I know they're very in-depth.
Mm-hmm.
Just a large 138-page book on 2 kings from Fiji. You gotta be pretty in-depth for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, geez, those kings, like, what did they even do?
Kings,
I mean, I'm sure they had full lives and stuff,
yeah.
But I mean, what was there, like,
War.
wars? There was wars, probably,
There's always
right?
war.
So, yeah, so you figure they've got that to talk about at least, but you're right, that
There's
does sound like a lot.
There was even war in the 1870s.
Really?
Yes, because...
Tribal war?
No, it wasn't tribal war.
Okay.
It was actually the English versus the Kaizolo.
Okay.
Because the English, when Mbao and all the other people had the session in 1874 and they stayed to Britain thought they had all of Fiji. But they were quickly to be alarmed that the Kaizolo provinces did not recognize any form of British government. And there was a brief war called the Little War in 1874.
I'm not sure I recognize any form of government, you know?
What?
I know how they feel. Like, I'm not sure, like,
Well, they recognized their governments.
Their own government, right? Their
But they just didn't recognize their...
That was like
seedings.
tribal law, right? Tribal chiefs.
It wasn't tribal at the time.
Oh,
it was.
wasn't?
It,
Okay.
I mean, it was kind of more advanced because European influence. Like, It was more like, as you would see in a conflict today.
More bureaucratic and had some hierarchy and stuff, huh?
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
They always had hierarchy.
Yeah.
The Kaizolo is really where you get to like the tribal warfare kind of stuff.
Okay. So, what else you got on your mind here?
Well, that was the resources episode for today.
Mm-hmm.
The next time we are going to do one on the Suva skyline.
The Suva skyline. You know, you and I have talked a little bit about this. I think that'll be interesting.
1984 and 2030 we're doing.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Hey, thanks. This has been interesting.
And if you want to keep interested in this, we'll be doing it often.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sidney.
Thank you, Day.
We just shook hands. You couldn't see that.
You couldn't. Goodbye.